You're our tour guide.
Okay,
And
thank you very much for coming this evening. I'm Gary Gisselman. I'm chair of the Historic Preservation Commission for the City of Wausau. So we're always about trying to tell the story of the history of Wausau and some of the structures and some of the history of the neighborhoods, and so we're very well into that. The City of Wausau, just as introduction, the City of Wausau has 3 historic districts. The downtown district, which pretty much is the 3rd Street district. There's a lot of history there, and also on the 2nd and 4th Street parts of it, pretty much from even from McIndoe Street up to the Wausau Center Mall. And then we have another district called the East Hill Historic District, which is a residence up pretty much on East Hill. That's also in the National Register of Historic Districts. So that's a federal district. And then the other federal district that we have is the Andrew Warren Historic District, which is pretty much that area from about 4th Street all the way up Franklin, including a variety of almost up to the railroad depot would be another place. So we have historic districts, but we also have a lot of other landmarks throughout the city. So we will start. We're going to do a little walking tour of the city. We'll end up down at the Heinz store. So we'll make a little circle. But first of all, across the street is the Chatterbox. Of course, that has the facade has undergone a lot of different remodeling through the years, but that was a bar on this corner in this neighborhood for a long time. I'm not sure exactly when that bar was or tavern was established, but we know that at least it goes back to the 1920s. So it is a long, and if some of you may remember, they used to, in the back part of it, they used to show movies on summer afternoons. That was the place to come for movies, and they had a little movie entertainment section in the back of their property. So it was not, no, it was not. The individual owners through the years, I can just remember it being called the Chatterbox, but it was other names in earlier years. In this neighborhood, as well as other neighborhoods throughout the city, you're going to find maybe 1 or 2 or maybe 5 different style of houses. One is this style of house, which we would call an American four-square, because if you look at it, it's pretty much a square house, and there's a little bit of markings up on the front gable and all, and some other ornamentation, which sort of lends it towards more of a Queen Anne, but not quite there. But basically, it's an American four-square with 4 gables and a front porch. The other style that you're going to see is across the street is what we call an L. It's just basically an E. It's spelled ELL because it has one side coming off of the front gable part of the house. So you're going to see that at that house and a variety of other front gabled houses. You see a little bit of an extension coming off the side. That is what we call an L house. ELL, L style of house. As part of this neighborhood, you're seeing a working class. We have a lot of variety of factories in this neighborhood. Curtis and Yale, the shoe company down on First Avenue, the ice works, a variety of other things that we'll point out in a few minutes. But so when I first looked at this structure, I thought it might be a boarding house, because I think it's big enough so that it would maybe be some kind of a boarding house. But if you notice the ornamentation up on the 2nd floor, it's for sale, so somebody quick buy it and put it back into its good nature again, because it is really quite a unique building unto itself. in any kind of historic district here on the west side, I think Scotty's here will be a key part of that development. This was 1886. It was built in 1886, most likely because of Ringel brick. And if you look up, you see the ornamentation of the corbels up on the roof line. And also notice the windows with the keystone windows, the rounded windows, all elements perhaps very elementary of an Italianate style of architecture. The compromise in all of this is the addition in 1910 when they lost when they did not carry through with the rich ornamentation that you see on this building. They just pretty much went with a very basic addition in 1910. As part of this neighborhood in the 1880s, pretty primitive, but it may have been used as a grocery store, some type of department store, a general store at that time. But it was, by the nature of it, you can tell that it was a very important part of the neighborhood as it was developing in the 1880s. That's when there wasn't much here in that time, but this, you could tell that this was really an important part of that early life here on the west side. Are any questions so far? No questions? Okay.
Was this building kind of unique in styling at that time?
No, unique on the west side, yes, because there were some brick buildings, some other buildings in the commercial district downtown that is sort of reflective of that same type of the old Marathon. They're gone, but the old Marathon County Bank and some other buildings would have been reflective of this style of architecture. Also, we do not know the architect of this building.
Mr. Gisselman, was this a carriage house at one time next to this? I don't want to call it a tar paper shack, but
the house.
If you want to call it.
I saw that, and I'm not quite sure what the story on that. It could have very well have been some type of carriage house, some type of a delivery. Maybe it looks like it's a very big house,
right.
So it could have been another boarding house of some sort. It may have been a livery stable, blacksmith. In the early days, it could have been a variety of different things, sort of as a part of the house itself. But a lot of different places had a side building, either carriage house or livery stable of some sort. I'll just so that there was on this block engine company number 2. On this block, of course, that was a long time gone, but there was also a firehouse. Right, it's that a little further on down, and so we had the main one downtown on 3rd Street, number 2 here, number 3 on 3rd, and on Bridge Street and 8th Street, and then number 4 on the corner of 3rd Avenue and Thomas Street. Further afield from here, and I didn't want to walk up, but you have First English Lutheran Church up on 3rd Avenue. When that was established in the late 1800s, that basically was the first English church. The rest of them were either mostly German or there was a Polish Catholic church, but early days it was the churches were pretty much in, especially the Lutheran churches were pretty much German. So that basically was the first English, and that their original church was on First Street on the east side, and then they came over to the west side much later in the middle part of the 1900s. I don't have an exact date on that, but so then they claim, so that was the first English Lutheran church. I'll wait till that traffic calms down a little bit, but across the street we have the Mary Port Chapel. This was built in 1884 as a mission of the First Presbyterian Church downtown. So Mary Poor was a person who owned a lot of land in this area. She was one of the charter members of the First Presbyterian Church, and it was part of the activity of the First Presbyterian Church to establish missions throughout Wausau and throughout into the suburbs of Marathon County. So the First Presbyterian Church established this what we now call the Mary Poor Chapel, but now since through the years it is now the home of the Central Wisconsin School of Ballet. Scotty's, it was built in 1884, so as part of the First Presbyterian Church's mission emphasis, it was built at that time. The style is called collegiate Gothic. I'm not sure what that means, but as part of the First Presbyterian Church's mission emphasis, they also established what we now know as the Underwood Chapel on 4th Avenue and Thomas Street. It was also a part of their chapel. They had Sunday schools there for the west side, and they conducted small services there also. I'm trying to find 131 North, and this has to be 131 North, 3rd Avenue, the home of the old, and if some neighborhoods that used to be the Wausau Broom Company. At one time, Sam Deutsch had a Wausau Broom Company. He manufactured brooms that went throughout Marathon County, and he would have salesmen that would go out into Marathon County, take orders for brooms, and then he would come back here, have them made, and then take them back out. You'll hear more of this story at the cemetery. Samuel Deutsch was a key member in the early days of the Hebrew Cemetery and Mount Sinai congregation. Across the street, some of these sort of unassuming but Herman Nordy memorials. It's been on that corner for a long time, and that's symbolic of the red granite industry, the memorials and markers, cemetery markers that Herman Nordy has been producing, sort of a little factory really, because it would be up to him to get the polished granite tombstone, and it would be up to him to put the names and the years and all of that and process that for the cemetery at Pine Grove or whatever. So he has been on this corner for a good 100 years, because that's when the prime time of red granite was here, and he was always a key part of that purveyor of red granite here in Wausau. But this, we talked about Mary Poor Chapel. First Presbyterian Church wasn't the only church that did mission emphasis on the west side. This was the Sunday school for St. Stephen's Lutheran Church up into the 1950s, when they built their addition to the church on 5th and McClellan. But prior to that, they would have Sunday school. They would have a variety of, it was sort of another west side mission of St. Stephen's Lutheran Church. And you don't think that these were happening here on the west side. It wasn't until Trinity Lutheran Church in 1910 really that an established church, and we can talk about that back at the Salvation Army if you wish, but it wasn't until the 1910 maybe 09 or 08, but it was at that time that Trinity Lutheran Church on Stewart Avenue was established, really one of the first true worshiping churches here in the city on the west side, and I have a story to go with that, but we'll talk about that at, pardon?
I already heard it.
You did?
You talked at my church last year.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite stories, so I always have to tell that story. Another sort of a smaller story to get, houses like this most likely was a boarding, or, I think they must have most likely had a flat on the second floor. Again, for workers, heavy into the working class neighborhoods that was started on this side. And we're not going to go up 4th Avenue this evening, but at your leisure, go up 4th Avenue up to Stewart, just walk the streets up to 4th Avenue, up to Stewart Avenue, because it really gets you a great variety of houses, a different style of architecture that's really a classic. Some people in that neighborhood really do take care of the houses very well. So at your leisure, we're not going to go up there today, but feel free to take some time to go up there and see the unique buildings that we have up there. But quite unusual, this was most likely some type of carriage house, livery stable, because most likely what they did is they hoisted the hay for the horses up to the second floor, because most likely that was some entry part for the hay for the horses to come up, or it could have been some other kind of storage shed that they would have lifted up the whatever merchandise it was up into that second floor. So that's why you see that door, basically that gate on the second floor. You do not see that very many places in the city of Wausau. So I just wanted to point that out to you, because that is quite unusual. That element is pretty well gone from our history. So I'll be kind of curious to see what that is, what that's. But across the street, we have the Heinz Dairy, built in the end of the 1800s. I'm sorry, in the early 1920s. Let me stand corrected. This is one of, as much as Marathon County was the dairy capital of Wisconsin, really. Dairying was a big time event here in Marathon County. Pretty much, well, it was. As soon as the white pine left, Wausau down, the farmers came in, started dairy farming, and that was pretty much one of the rural economies that kept Marathon County going for a long time. And the remaining dairy in all of the city of Wausau, we had quite a few. Steber Dairy on 6th Street, Tapper Dairy up on Evergreen, a variety of other dairies in Wausau. This is one that still remains. Quite a unique, the architecture, it does have its flaring parts, especially on the second floor. You can see some really elements that are quite unique to the building. Of course, through the years, especially on the back side, it has not been good to the building. I wish that it would be, somebody would come in and put it back to its original condition, but it's still here, it's still part of the neighborhood, and it has been, and it is an important part of the dairy industry of Wausau and of Marathon County. A variety, it was the first place in Marathon County that made ice cream, and it was other parts, they did a lot to the dairy industry here in Wausau and Marathon County. I guess that, and then of course when I forget which dairy went out of business, then it became empty, but it's still, I think, one of the rare buildings, especially on the west side, but throughout the city, that reflects our dairy heritage. Again, an American four-square building. Noticing the scaling up on the second floor, and the returns on the gable on the returns, very common. The little pediment above the porch, all elements that are quite common throughout the city, but yet are very distinctive in giving this type of architecture pretty much throughout the city of Wausau.
Are we at the end of our? So truly,
Okay.
like I said, we don't know a lot of the history of the house. We've been here 17 years. We moved here in '97, fall of '97. We do know the previous owner before us were the Berghammers, and he was a painter contractor, was what he did. There's remnants of wallpaper and paint that were left behind, so we kind of knew what his trade was. But and we just recently had the entire house re-sided, soffit, fascia. It was a 3-month project this summer, and we're glad it's done. So I have photos of before and after if you want to take a look in the scrapbook and see what we've been through this summer to help build up our neighborhood.
Great. Okay. Do we have a story of the carriage house?
Well,
or
the house. Well, we were.
I made up a story, but I'm not sure that was the right story.
Well, the house was built in 1898, right?
97 or
97.
98.
Matter of fact, we've had old newspaper clippings up in the loft and in here from the 1930s. So back from that time, and there used to be a carriage house, and in the garage actually there used to be there's a pulley system where you could tell where they pulled up straw up
Carriages,
there.
or
Oh, I
I'm
was
not sure
right.
what-
Carriages, yeah.
Yes,
The
yes.
side doors on the garage where we just had new ones put in, but those was where they pulled up the straw and loaded straw up on the top. We call it the dance floor now because it's all big one floor
open.
up there, but it's pretty nice. There's a workroom, utility room.
Most likely
Yeah.
horses on the first floor, straw
Correct.
on the second.
Yep.
Maybe a little carriage or something.
Correct. Yep. Yep. And you know, in the house, we still have the original light fixtures in the ceilings. They're all ceramic, old light fixtures. They're all original. That's still in there. So some of the house is still original. Some of it's been updated because we just have to. Yeah. Our downstairs bathroom's got one of those lift handle toilets. If you remember those,
It's an oldie.
holds about 20 gallons of water.
Every flush.
It still works perfectly.
Do you have some of the original flooring?
I'm sure
If
we
you look
do
underneath the
under
carpet, yeah. Matter of fact, we know there's hardwood floors under there, but they're not in great shape, so we have an open carpet over the top.
I
Yeah.
can recommend a restoring outfit.
Yeah, that's something we'd like to do
Nice.
down the road too, but
Sure.
we have to do it in pieces, obviously. We spent an obscene amount of money this year already on the house. So.
That does it. So what I wanted, just for 5 or 10 minutes this evening, just sort of to finish off, because I wanted to present a little bit about the history of this neighborhood. Curtis and Yale sitting now on the what was then Clinton Street. This is Clinton Street, coming off the bridge, now associated by Associated Bank and all. Curtis and Yale, the largest employer in the city, making sashes and doors and a lot of different wood products, pretty much from the 1880s when Cornelius Curtis came up from Iowa, started Curtis and Yale. And what they did was they made sashes and doors and moldings, any kind of a wood product that you could imagine. They were employing in the early, for a good part of 600 people. So they were a large part of this neighborhood as a big part of the whole city, really. But they were established early here in the 1880s and continued on till about in the 1950s. But they dominated the west side.
Yeah.
What I have here is a little map, early map, I think about 1900 maybe, of the city of the west side. This would have been, this was Clinton. It's kind of hard to imagine Clinton Street coming off the Scott Street Bridge, ending up right straight ahead at a little commercial district across the street from Associated Bank. But Curtis and Yale would eventually take over this whole block of land between what was that, Elm Street and what we now know as Clinton. So they were a gigantic industrial place here in the city. And then and you see the Mary Poor addition, what we had talked about at the Mary Poor Chapel. They owned a lot of this land, and they were big developers of this neighborhood. You know, little hotels on Callan Street. Houses are starting to develop. Commercial districts are starting to develop. This is a picture of Mary Poor. Her husband died very early, and she pretty much carried on as being an important part of the First Presbyterian Church for many years. This is her, this is Mary Poor Chapel again. This is the First English Lutheran Church, which we had talked about on the corner. I just wanted to, this is in the early days when they just started. Of course, through the years, they've added on quite a bit. This is Trinity Lutheran as part of this neighborhood. Trinity Lutheran up on Stewart Avenue, very important. Like I said, in the early days, the Lutherans on the west side were getting tired of sending their kids across those rickety bridges to Zion Lutheran on the east side for confirmation, for school, for all of and for church services. They were tired of it. So that by 1908, 1909, Zion Lutheran Church on the east side gave Trinity this land up on Stewart Avenue, and thus Trinity Lutheran Church, and they've been a strong part of the neighborhood ever since. And then this is Klein-Heinz, and this is Scotty's, and this is this is the Clark Building. Of course, I call it the Citizens State Bank Building. I have notes on it.
I think it's the second building that Citizens had.
Right, they were on First Avenue.
They actually were in the building where CBA is located now downtown.
Well, I just have them on the west side and First Avenue.
But I found out that they were, I read something that they were in that building on 4th and Scott.
Really?
I remember them as the King's Knight. So.
And what did you do at the King's Night, Rob?
Statute of limitations is well away.
It's well over?
Well
Come on. Your residents want to know what you did when you were young.
Deny.
Okay, a Citizen State Bank organized in 1907. And I have an address of 312 South First Avenue, which would have been in that little commercial district, again, across the street from the Associated Bank. 1908, they moved into the quarters on Clark Street, and then in 1923 and 1941, they additions to this building, and it stood as Citizen State Bank and a variety of, just that one bank for 66 years. So it's first bank on the west side, an important part of the development of the west side and the commercial aspects over here. The question came up, and I just and I show this house. You know, this is the at 812 Grant Street, the Lyman Thayer house. This is what somewhat symbolic of the East Hill Historic District. Pretty much everything east of the railroad tracks on the East Hill. That is on the National Register of Historic. That district is on the National Register, as well as the city of Wausau. And this house stands alone. It's really an ornate Queen Anne style of house, but it stands alone as on the National Register. And then this is the Knox Kreitzer house on the corner of 5th and Franklin on the National Register as part of the Andrew Warren Historic District. So like I said before, talking a little bit about historic districts, so we have two National Register of Historic districts in town, a lot of other variety of smaller buildings, some things at the fairgrounds as part of a variety of other districts that we have. So we are really blessed in this city, I think, with some unique historic structures, buildings, houses that really reflect our history back over 150 years. So the question would come up, what does the city of Wausau do with regard to historic structures? Well, we also have our own landmark commission that does landmark buildings throughout the city, a variety of buildings in Marathon Park, some individual houses, some buildings, some parks like Barker Stewart Island is on our list. So we want to be a part of recognizing historic structures throughout the city of Wausau. And it's a several years ago the city council put into various steps. So first of all, it starts with the Preservation Commission, then it goes to the Plan Commission, and then it goes to the city council. So there's a variety. We just don't take some building and say you're going to be on our list, because once it does get on our list, there are several rules and regulations that apply, that if you're going to be changing the building, that you need a building permit. You would need to come to the Preservation Commission for a certificate of appropriateness, because we take these landmarks throughout the city very seriously, and we want to make sure specifically that if you're doing anything visible from the main street, that it's in line with the nature of the neighborhood and also in line with the nature of the architecture of the building. So there are several other things that we do as part of the commission, but I think those are our two main functions. Are there questions? Is that, Deb, how you perceive? Do you have questions or something that I may have missed?
I guess I wanted to know, Gary, what's involved in getting a historic district then? I mean, do you have to have homes that are historic designation first before you look at a historic district?
I think it goes hand in hand. I think that right now we're taking a look and in fact, I didn't talk about the DUAV building on the corner of 3rd and Garfield, the old Dutch Hall. Used to be a German and don't ask me to the DUAV. It's in German, and I can get Deutsche Arbeiter out of there, but that's as far as I go. But it was a German working men's club that they had a dance hall, a variety of social things going on at that DU. Now it is part of Catholic Charities. But those are some of the buildings that we would be looking at as possible additions to the Wausau Landmark Ordinance.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Thank you very much
Well, thank you, Gary, very much.